Thank you very much. I appreciate you folks allowing me to present the work that myself and the rest of us are doing in New Mexico. And I just want to acknowledge SIDA and Amnesty. I'm sure a lot of you folks have had really good conversations with SIDA. And the office couldn't be half as far along as we are without SIDA being a colleague and really a team member of the AFSC New Mexico program. I also want to acknowledge a little bit is Patrick Jaramillo. Patrick Jaramillo was hired a little bit over a year ago, and he's the statewide trainer. And he's been shadowing me for about a year, and he's starting to take over the training programs himself. So there's Patrick there that's learning really well, really learning how to get in the community, learning how to work within community, understanding their needs and interpreting it. So it's really nice to have other people coming on, seeing the program grow, and then having the capacity to actually manage that growth. Because a lot of times programs grow and then they start to fail because there's not the capacity to follow through. So SIDA is a key to that. Patrick is a very, very instrumental now. And then we hired Susan a little bit over a year ago. And Susan is part of the administrative staff. So she really does a lot of that behind scenes work, like the credit card, the financing, make sure a lot of the newsletters get out and stuff. So we have a really good core team in New Mexico. Considering when I first started about 10 years ago, the program was going down and down a little bit further and further. And then we were able to kind of work a little bit, do some really thoughtful strategic planning, thanks to the support of Shan. And at that time it was Sonia as the assistant regional director. We went through a series of strategic planning trainings. So it really laid out how we were going to do the work, what kind of work we were going to do, and the impact that we wanted to have in the AFSC New Mexico program. So I think that it's really important to take a step back and do that type of strategic planning. That way it allows you to focus in the direction that you really want to go. And I believe that's the reason why the New Mexico program has been able to grow from one staff person when David Lujan was the director to two when I took over, SIDA and myself. Now there's 4 full-time staff. Plus we have 3 trainers in New Mexico and 15 trainees. So you can just see how the New Mexico program has really exploded over the last 6 years or so. And we continue to get calls almost on a daily basis asking for more help from AFSC New Mexico. Because of the water issues that are occurring, people need their land farmed, they need the water used, and there's a lot of poverty in New Mexico. So people are looking for opportunities on how to make just a few more dollars to make those ends meet. So it's really important that I think that I really wanted to acknowledge staff in New Mexico and to see how important it is to have very, very capable staff to assist in the development of the programs. So the mission of the New Mexico program is to protect land and water, promote economic viability through sustainable agriculture, farmer-to-farmer training programs. We also do policy work, and you'll listen to a little bit of policy work that we do. We do it very subtly, though. It's not like we're up in everybody's face demanding anything. We've learned how to work with our leaders in the state and on the federal level so we can have significant impacts without making too many waves, because we feel it's more appropriate to work with the people that are there if we can, change it from in, and then get the results that we really need to help our folks on the ground. That's our policy work. I always like to talk a little bit about the acequia system because our mission is to protect land and water. And water being the most important resource in the Southwest and in New Mexico, it's really important to give people a context. So the acequia system is an Arabic word, and it was taught by the Moors to the Spanish during the 7-year conquest of Spain, and then brought over to the New World when the Europeans settled in Central America and then migrated up to North America. That same system is still in place, and it's been in place for over 400 years in New Mexico. The first form of water distribution was also the first form of democracy in the United States. And the first form of democracy was that it didn't matter your economic status or your social status, everybody got one vote. And the vote was to vote for the mardomo, and that's the gentleman that was in charge of the day-to-day distribution of the water. He would say who got the water, how much water was going, what time you were going to get it, if you were going to get it at all, and then the priorities were set. First priority was livestock and vegetables. First was vegetables, second was livestock, third were orchards and pastures. So there was a priority already set as to how water would be distributed, and the gentleman was in charge of making sure that it was equitable. The other votes that were casted were for 3 comisionados. And the comisionados were the folks that settled any disputes between the mardomo and the parciantes. The parciantes being the members of the acequia associations, the folks that were farming, ranching, or growing fruits and vegetables. So the parciantes would vote for the mardomo, they'd also vote for the 3 comisionados. And the comisionados settled the disputes. And then there was an election every 2 years. So if the comisionados weren't doing their job, or if the mardomo was abusing the water, or taking more water for himself or his relatives, then there would be an election, he would be voted out, and a new mardomo would be put in. And that was happening over 400 years ago, 300, 400 years ago, in northern New Mexico, southern Colorado, West Texas, and Arizona. A little bit in California also. But anymore, New Mexico is where the acequias are. The New Mexico Acequia Association has been able to organize and has, I think, over 200 members, or 200 acequias as members in the Acequia Association. So it's a vibrant organization that really works on protecting the water at the state legislature and at the federal level. And then there's the other thing about the acequia system, it was an alternative to Western water law. And Western water law described in New Mexico is that senior water rights and junior water rights. Well, the alternative is the law of the Indies, is where everything and everybody has equal rights to that natural resource. So it doesn't matter if you were an animal, if you were part of the landscape that the aquifer had to be recharged, or if you were using it for human consumption. Everybody and everything got equal share in that water. So there was no priority. That is equitable distribution of water versus Western water law now. And now what's going on too is that in Western water law, there's this provision of use it or lose it. So traditional farmers and Native American people are at risk of losing their water if they don't use it for agriculture or other purposes. And the state engineer is about to start using that law to move water and transfer water across New Mexico. So it forces the Native Americans, and it's their right, it forces them to put golf courses in the middle of the desert. And because they need to use that water. And if they don't use the water, the state engineer could move to take it away from them. So in the middle of the desert, where we're getting like 3 inches of water per year, where we've been in a drought for 7 years, you see these big sprinklers going to water golf fields that aren't being used. So the laws aren't making a lot of sense. So how do we start to change these laws? This is an alternative. The acequia system is the alternative, where we use more common sense. Instead of trying to commodify water, we have more common sense in how that water is being distributed. And part of AFSC's program is not only the training program that we're going to talk about, but building that awareness in these urban areas that we're going to see as to the farmers alone aren't going to be able to protect the water. So we need to have a conscious awareness program that engages the urban areas to help protect the water for agriculture. And as you'll see, the reason is because these farmers are growing food, using that water, growing food, and feeding the kids in those agricultural centers. So we feel that it's going to make a lot of sense that people are going to stand up and tell the state engineer, basta, that's enough. Let's use our water to protect our people, create economic opportunities within our ranching and farming sector. That's what AFSC is doing right now in New Mexico. That's part of our campaign. That's all around the acequias. Who we work with, I think that, I don't know if a lot of you folks know, but I keep thinking of Tanya and Mike and these guys. They've heard my talk about 4 or 5 times. Like, oh yeah, they could probably give the talk for me now.
Not as well.
Yeah. So we work with historically underserved, limited resource, and people of color. That's our main focus in New Mexico. And it's because those are the most vulnerable people and the most vulnerable children in New Mexico. So what better impact than we can have than to focus these points with these people that have historically been disenfranchised from the regular kind of lines of resource development. The other thing that we do in New Mexico is we create jobs. That's the economic opportunity that we do. It's not jobs that people are going to get rich on, but it's jobs that they're going to be able to pay the bills. It's jobs that they're going to be able to send their kids to school. And if they like, they can take a vacation, health insurance. All those things are taken into account when we do our farm and business planning. And we help individuals develop their farm around those financial needs. So it's not like we're trying to save the world or we're going to grow food to feed the world. We're going to grow food to feed our families and our communities. And we're going to make enough money to pay our bills. And that's the philosophy that we use in New Mexico around the development of jobs. The other thing is alternatives to military. Understanding that New Mexico is one of the most poor states in the United States. And we have one of the most vulnerable children population. So when there comes the young people that aren't graduating from high school, because we have a 50% non-graduation rate, 50% of our kids aren't graduating high school in New Mexico. The only alternative that they have is to join the military. And they'll go ahead and join the military, and then they feel that that's the only choice they have. So we're offering alternatives to that. We'll also preserve culture, families, and we help communities that are impacted by water and sustainable agriculture. Traditional agriculture and spirituality. We have a small film. If we have time, we'll show it to you. It's about 4 minutes long, and it talks about, and it shows about how people are so adhered to the spiritual process of growing food. So the fields will be blessed. In one of the areas, Fidel Gonzalez and his teammates, his people from their clan, will do ceremonial dances and they bless the land. And then we'll go to the feast days, the harvest days. San Isidro Day is the blessing of the water. And huge amounts of people turn out from the community. The priests will come out. The medicine men will come out. They'll bless the water. We'll have feasts. We'll plant the seeds. And then the crops will start to grow. I have a real good story about this. So Fidel Gonzalez is a Native American, or is a native from Mexico. He's an American now. He's a dancer, an Aztec dancer. And he was part of the first cadre of growing food in Albuquerque. Fidel, Joseph, and Jeff were the first 3 people that went through our training program. We planted the same seeds on the same site, on the 3 different sites. We used the same nutrients. I showed him how to use the same amount of water to water it and everything. And all of a sudden, I started noticing that Fidel's greens were getting bigger. His tomatoes were huge. And I looked at him, I told him, what are you using, Miracle Grow or something, Fidel? Because we teach people how to use organic practices. And he goes, no, we had ceremony before I planted. And you could actually see the difference in the production of his products. It was beautiful to see all the product he was getting. And that's what he attributed it to. And that's what we attribute it to, is that connectiveness with the earth and the spirit that allows us to be healthier and to be more in touch with the earth itself. That's what we base a lot of our work on, is how do we connect with the Creator? It's meant for us to grow food for our children. And you'll see it in New Mexico all over the different fields that we work in. It might be in different ways, in different kinds of religions, because we work with different people, but it's always about honoring the Creator and the Spirit, because that's what allows us to thrive itself. This is what we do. And I want to pass, I got a couple of these manuals out, but this is what we do. We ask people to participate in our training program, and the folks are recommended by their communities to AFSC. So it's not like AFSC is going out there and choosing anybody. We take what I call as a soft approach to community development and organizing. We go in and we make friends with people in the community. We start to understand their needs, and then we assess what kind of support they would like for us to accompany them with. That decided, they recommend who should join our training programs. Then we'll go through a screening process. Do they want to farm? Is it more than just a job? What do you see yourself doing in the future? Have you ever hugged a tree? Says a lot about people that don't know how to answer those questions. You know, so we get really into the interview process of it itself. And then they're chosen. They agree to train with us for 1 full year. That's a long commitment for people of limited resource. So we were able to get the resources to pay them a small stipends. And $700 a month. That's not very much. But when that's all that's coming in, it seems like a lot at the time. And then they're able to take what we learned, and within 30 days, if they follow our instructions, they're able to start making money in addition to the stipends. And people say, in 30 days, and I go, yeah, we teach them how to plant radishes. And then in 30 days, you can start to harvest those 50 bunches of radishes. You take them to the farmer's market, and you make $100 extra that week. 50 bunches of radishes comes off of a small little space about the size of this table. So we tell people, learn how to grow 10 crops. Don't try to save the world, just learn how to grow 10 crops. You learn how to grow 10 crops, and you take 50 bunches of carrots, 50 bunches of beets, 50 bunches of radishes, 50 bunches of kale, 50 bunches of chard, 20 pounds of tomatoes, 20 pounds of lettuce. You have $1,000 a week off of 10 little spaces like this. So it's not like you need 1,000 acres. It's not like you need a $100,000 loan to get started. That's why New Mexico's program is so effective, is because we're able to put the effort in that little seed money right on the ground where it's needed the most. And these people really, really change their lives around by being able to get that assistance from AFSC New Mexico and AFSC itself. And there's no bigger pride that you see when people go to the farmer's market. Pancho told me one time when he was going, he goes, he went to the market, he made $20 extra. That night he bought his wife a bouquet of flowers. He was so proud the next day. He went and he told me, Don, that's the best thing I've ever done. You should see how my wife loved me last night. You should see how proud my kids were. You know, and that was $20. That's a bouquet of flowers. That is huge when that's all you have and that's what you take to your family. And that's how you show your love for your family, is you go out there and you sweat and you work and you sell that product, and it makes you proud to get back home and share it with the rest of your family. That's the kind of stuff that we do at AFSC New Mexico. So they go through this training program for 12 full months. They work with us for 18 to 20 hours, and then they replicate what they learn on farm they own, on land they own, or AFSC helps them identify land, because as I mentioned earlier, people are calling AFSC saying, somebody has to farm my land and use my water. If not, the state engineer is going to take my water away. So there's a lot of people calling us saying, there's vacant land, there's water. Please use it so that we don't lose it. And that's why AFSC is so successful, because the timing, the thought, and the strategic planning was all there. So we do this training planning, we do farm planning, land assessment, and land links. That's where we help people identify land. We help them create, and you'll see in the forms of those manuals, we've created MOUs and MOAs as templates, so people can go ahead and use it to make not a legal agreement, but a step over a handshake. So there's some kind of knowledge and communication between the landowner and the trainees themselves. So it starts to make them think like business people. We need to put steps in place to assure that we're not going to be moved out. So we do planting, we do what kind of seed selections, what kind of crops they should plant at different times of the year, what kind of crops are companion planting so that you don't get so many pests, how to do sequential planting so the squash bugs don't eat all your squash. Those types of things we teach them. We don't only teach them, we practice them. So day after day, week after week, we're in the field, we're planting seeds. We're looking and learning about the mating seasons of the squash bug. We're learning about the different larvae of aphids, of ladybugs, of cutworms, so that we understand the science behind it and we can realize what it's going to take to make a good, healthy crop come out of those fields. And then some of the most important things that we do is we partner up with the different universities, New Mexico, UNM, New Mexico University, now New Mexico Northern College, which is one of our training sites for business planning. So that if you can figure out where your costs are, what your expenses are, where your money's going to go, it lets you plan for the future. And it lets you save a nickel here, a penny there, so that you can pay that electric bill at the end of the month. So it's not like we're trying to create scientists, but we're just trying to figure out how to pay the bills and how people stay above water. And then attaining resources. That's one of the more important things people want to learn, is where are the grants? Because USDA does have grants available for beginning farmers in different areas. Where can I go and get a 1% loan to buy a tractor? How do I fill out the application form to get an NRCS high tunnel? Those types of things are helpful to attain those resources that are available to other farmers. So that's a training program that we do throughout the year. And we go, we practice it, we do it, and then we practice it again. These are some of the sites that we've been working in. Albuquerque is Agricultura Network, and our partners there are La Placita Gardens. They work with risk at youth risk. So sometimes in their gardens, when I first started working with them, with Albino Garcia and stuff, young people with ankle bracelets would go to the farm, help clean the farm, harvest the vegetables, and then eventually they would work up to where people would trust them, the courts would trust them, and they'd go to the farmers markets. And Andrew, one of the young people in our training program, went through that. He graduated from our training program a couple of years ago. He got a certificate at the night that we had the ceremony, because every year we have a ceremony for all our graduates to get their certificates. He took his grandparents to the ceremony. And there was about 40 of us there. We had a nice dinner, and I was giving out their certificates. And Andrew came up and got his certificate. He acknowledged his grandparents, and you should see the pride his grandparents had. It's the first time he ever completed anything. He was off the courts. He was farming. He was a community. He's in the community now, and his grandparents and him, he held that certificate up. He was so proud of it. It just brought tears to all of us in the audience. And that's the kind of people that we're working with, people that are looking for a small opportunity just to change their lives around. And that's what AFSC New Mexico is providing for them. Those small opportunities that everybody needs just to turn our lives around. Andrew's just one of the stories. We have several people that have done that in New Mexico. Emerging Communities is Pablo Lopez. Pablo works with Red Wolf, a band of Native Americans, and he formed that band in the urban setting in Albuquerque, because when Native Americans leave their reservation and pueblos, they lose that spiritual connection. They end up, he says, doing drugs or going addicted to alcohol. So what he found out is people, Native Americans, come together, they have their sweat lodges in Albuquerque in the urban setting, and they heal themselves. Part of that healing was growing food. I taught Pablo, him and I had a small garden in his backyard. Then his clan started to replicate that in their backyards. And that's where they formed Emerging Communities. They're part of the Agricultura Network now. Fidel leads that team in the agriculture sector. And they employ up to 8 people per year. So Fidel at one point would hire a cook so that they would prepare the meals on the farm, and all the team members and all the farmers there would sit there and we'd eat lunch together, and then we'd go back to the field. So that's how different jobs are created within New Mexico. There's cooks hired, truck drivers hired, people that wash the lettuce, accountants now, people that are doing the deliveries. So there's more and more jobs other than just farming itself that's being created. We'll talk a little bit more about the National Immigrant Farmers Initiative here in a bit. And Budo has been one of our training sites. Algo Navativo is led by 3 women. It's 3 generations of women that run that farm. The grandma Eremita, the mom Margaret, and the granddaughter. They're all living and farm there. You should see when they go to the farmer's market. They have this beautiful outdoor kitchen, and they'll host dinner for people. Groups of people will go there. They'll harvest the vegetables. The women will prepare the food, and then they'll have dinner along the Rio Grande. It's a beautiful, beautiful setting. Anthony is split between Texas and New Mexico. That's one of the projects that we started about 18 months ago. Yvonne Diaz is the trainer there. She went through our first year of training, and then she applied to be the trainer. And she's leading the team down there. It's her, 3 other women that are down there, and 2 men. So she is the lead down there and doing very well. This last spring, they sold their first sale to Gadsden and Las Cruces School District, and they sold over 220 pounds of fresh salad greens. And they continue to sell to the Las Cruces School District, the co-op, and farmers markets in El Paso, Las Cruces, and in Anthony itself. This year, we're able to help the Water District get $750,000 for an appropriation to build a farmers market in Anthony. This year, we'd like to go to the legislature and ask for money for the school district so that they can pay the farmers a living wage for the produce we hope to sell to the Gadsden and Las Cruces School District in the coming years. Much like we did in Albuquerque with Senator Dee Dee Feldman. She was able to get $80,000 from the state legislature appropriate to the Albuquerque public schools, and now they're able to pay the farmers that we trained a living wage. So they're not working for slave wages the way the perception is that to be a farmer, you're going to be a slave sun up to sundown 7 days a week. If that's the way you're farming, you're doing it wrong. You're not doing it right. So there's ways where you can have a decent living, make enough money to pay the bills, and still have enough time to enjoy your community and family. And that's what AFSC New Mexico is helping teach these people. Corrales, we're really proud of Corrales. ARCA is a group home with adults with disabilities. And we've helped them put in a blackberry patch. They have a beautiful asparagus patch. They grow tomatoes. They grow salad greens that they sell to Intel. And the clients help on the farm itself. They don't do all the labor or anything, but they're able to help on the farm. And you should see the joy when Mike goes out there and picks tomatoes and peppers, and he goes, "Oh, I made the best salsa last night, Don." It's so beautiful to hear these adult clients participating and growing food for themselves. That's one of that's one of my biggest joys, to go out there and help those folks when I can. The hands-on training, this is year-round. This is what I do. I mean, I have a shirt with buttons now, but usually I'm in a t-shirt and a big hat and on my knees full of mud. So we teach them by doing it. It's not like we sit there and we tell them, "Go do this." It's like, "Here, let me show you how to do it." And then we work with them day in and day out. So it can be 25, 30 degrees in the cold frame. We're covering up all the plants, making sure they don't freeze. Or it can be 102 degrees and we're out there working together. But that's where these relationships start. That's where people know how to work together. So at the 11th hour, we're not competing for that small market, but we're working together to create a larger market. So instead of taking a low price, saying that Joseph there has 300 pounds of lettuce and this happened to us, we had an overabundance of lettuce for 1 year. We're practicing, we're learning how to grow sequentially. And what happened, all the growers planted the greens at the same week. So we ended up having like 500 pounds of salad greens and we couldn't sell them. The co-op in New Mexico and Albuquerque wanted to give us the same price they give lettuce from Mexico. And we told them, no, we had our business plan, we had our farm plan, we did our arithmetic, we'd be losing money. The growers understood that. So they ended up donating hundreds of pounds to the food depots, to the homeless shelters, and then we ended up feeding the chickens quite a bit of certified organic lettuce. But we wouldn't sell it to the co-op at a cheap price. So when the co-op needed lettuce, when the rains fell in California and the lettuce fields failed, and the lettuce price went up to $28 a case, went up to $63 a case, Agricultura Network got their $5.50 a pound. And so the co-op learned that if they want to work with ACN, they have to pay a living wage to the farmers. And now they're buying on a regular basis. But it was working together where one person didn't give up and say, "Okay, I'll sell it to you at $3 a pound." They all stuck together. They demanded that higher price. They went through hard times and they shared in the good times too. But that's what it takes, is working together a year, 2 years, understanding who we are, sharing sweat, blood, and family issues. And then you come together in a really tight and a really nice group of people. And that's the way we do it. On the ground, practicing it every day. It's not theory, we do it. the infrastructure for the year. We talked about how we help people find the resources. And then part of our training is we actually put cold frames up every year. And like in the case of AFSC, we're able to get resources and we put up the training sites. And then like last year, Camila Trujillo, Beth Sanchez, Ruth, all part of our training programs, applied to NRCS and received cold frames. So that was part of our training, is we went to Camila's and we helped her put up her cold frame. We went to Beth Ann's and helped her put up cold frame. And now we're going to go to Ruth's and help her put up her cold frame. So you can see how we're not only as individuals, but as community, we're helping each other grow. And that's a proof in it. So we teach people how to grow and put up the cold frames. The aggregation, teaching aggregation. By the way, that's the cold frames that we suggest putting up. They're 30 feet wide, they're 96 feet long, and they're approximately 12 feet high. Each one of those beds that you see Fidel planting in the back with the cedar, each one of those beds will produce about 80 to 100 pounds of salad greens per week. And if you're selling each pound of salad greens for $5, that's about $500 a week. They're five. So you can see how a significant income can be done of a small piece, 30 feet by 96 feet long. And in this case, this greenhouse, the lot that they put it on in Fidel's backyard is just a little bit larger than that. And in some cases, some of the backyards that we're working in are 30 by 60 feet and even smaller. But they're able to harvest 50 or 80 bunches of radishes or 100 bunches of carrots. So that's the way we aggregate the product. So there's no one large field. There's 19 different sites in Albuquerque, and they're all aggregating their product to meet the demand of a large institutional buyer, the Albuquerque Public Schools. And I've talked about Agricultura Network some. Here's some of what they sell to. They sell to the public schools, 6 local restaurants, 2 hotels, La Montanita Co-op. That's a co-op that I mentioned to you that we had to play hardball with them. The distribution centers, as well as farmers markets. The other cool thing that they started too this last year is they started a CSA of 100 members. And everybody says, well, CSA is for just rich people that can afford to pay a CSA price. Well, these people are so conscious about their communities that they asked the people that could afford the higher price CSA if they were willing to pay a little bit more to support the low income. They were willing. So now when the CSA members go to the pickup, they can't tell whether it's for who paid the higher price or who paid the lower price. So all the boxes are the same. And it's people are conscious enough to and able to support a lower family. So that's the way they're thinking about how can we get food to low-income people that deserve good, healthy, organic food also. And they don't have the money to do it. Well, sometimes people are willing to support each other if asked correctly. People are kind and they're actually willing to support each other. A little bit about the USDA Farm Bill is probably a lot of you folks know it's the second largest budget item in the United States, only second to the military. It has several titles in there. The most important title, well, they're all very important, and we work under quite a bit of them, energy and everything. But the one right now that I like to talk a little bit more is about the nutritional programs, because how vulnerable they are today. And if you listen to the news and talking about what the Senate and the Congress is doing, they're looking at cutting several $billions from the nutritional programs. And that means kids are going to go hungry. Women, infants are going to go without food, without shelter, without medical services. And I think it's the Tea Partiers that are holding everything at ransom. So I just say that because if there's anything that we can do and try to move them out or somehow change that atmosphere, I think that we really have to focus and do that. Because it's a crime that people are going to go hungry in a country that has so much food and wealth. And yet we're still trying to stick our nose in all sorts of foreign affairs that I believe we don't have any business doing and that people don't want us there anyway. So that's my spiel on the nutrition program. I wish that they'd get over it and actually do the right thing. But we've also been benefits of USDA. I mean, one of the big legs that we got in the New Mexico program is thanks to Aisha Mason and Shan, and they allowed us to go for the first federal grant that AFSC had gone for, and we were awarded it. And they did all these special exemptions. I remember them writing to the executive committee and asking permission for New Mexico to apply for a federal grant. We applied for it, thanks to Elizabeth Shea, and we received it. It was for a small grant. I think it was $300,000 for 3 years. But that's what really launched New Mexico program off. So I can't say all negative things about USDA, but there will be some things that I'm not completely happy about. The other program that I really like to share with, and I've chaired it, is the SARE programs in Western SARE. And that's the only federal program that I know of that gives money directly to farmers and ranchers. They can get up to $30,000 to do applied research and demonstration on the farms or ranches themselves. So a farmer or a group of 3 farmers can apply, get up to $30,000, and try something really innovative on their farm without risking their own capital to see if it works. And I've proven it. I did a solar project. That's our whole program. I put solar panels up. I put hot water underneath the cold frames. We started to grow produce, and that's the way we were able to sell to the schools. People would say, "You're crazy. You can't grow produce in the winter. It's too cold." And I proved them wrong through one of these SARE grants. And then the researchers would go to the farm and look at it, and they'd say, "Yeah, we don't know." So I helped the Alcalde Science Center get a research grant. And now their researchers are proving what we were doing 10 years ago actually does work. So now it's being published in the scientific journals. But it took that kind of effort to go back and, we had to prove it ourselves, and we have to put it through researchers, and then the researchers have to prove it themselves. So, but that's the process, and that's how it works. So the Western SARE, I think, is a great program. NRCS that I talked about earlier, that helps our trainees get these high tunnels at 80 to 20% cost share. So the government puts in 80% of the cost, and the farmers, we know they're a limited resource. We've been able to figure out how to use sweat equity as that other 20% to match that grant requirement. So they're able to put up these cold frames. Beginning farmer rancher grants, I think I talked about that briefly. That helps farmers get started. They can actually apply for a grant for education, but then actually get loans for 1% to buy land. And we'll help people walk through that process and apply for those loans, much like we do with the NRCS, much like we do help our trainees get SARE grants or other types of grants. I'm really proud to say a lot of the organizations and trainees that we've taught have been able to access these federal programs and some private foundation funding to help them do their work.
I think we have like 5 more minutes.
Okay. All right, we've got 5 minutes. So the shortcomings of USDA, we talk about how good they are and some of the shortcomings, but in actuality, I participated in a study with Oxfam International. And several years ago, it was identified that people of color, limited resource, and underserved communities, we represent about 15% of the farmers in the United States in that day. But yet, we're getting less than 2% of the funding that's allowable. And it's because of the racism and discrimination within USDA itself. How did it get remedied, or how is it being remedied? Black farmers, Hispanic farmers, women, and Native American farmers have sued USDA, and in most of the cases have won. But the budgets as they are, they go, "Oh yeah, you won the settlement, but there's no money, we're sorry." But yet they're still able to give the 10%, that 1% of the largest corporations in America, they're able to give them billions of dollars in subsidies. But yet they're not able to help the 15% that grow the food for our kids in our communities. That's part of the problem with USDA. We have to change it from inside or outside. Our National Immigrant Farmers Initiative, I'm real proud to say that I helped form this organization about 6 years ago with the support of AFSC New Mexico. We focus on immigrant farmers, not only in New Mexico, but across the United States. We have an office in Washington, D.C., and we have several different organizations that we're working with across the U.S. We have programs going on in New Hampshire, Washington State, California, Florida, Texas, Massachusetts. And these programs are to help immigrant farmers understand their rights and access the programs that are there, and actually help them have a voice in D.C. to advocate for themselves. because the changing demographics in the United States is saying that U.S. farmers are getting older. The only farmers that are going to grow our food, there's a lot of young farmers from the United States that are learning and participating. It's a huge amount of young farmers. I work with them on a regular basis, but there's not enough coming in. The next population of farmers are going to be grown immigrant farmers. So we engage them from the very beginning so they understand what their rights are and they understand what their needs and how to advocate for themselves. That's the role of NIFI, helping organize immigrant farmers across the U.S. Briefly, I was able to attend with Linda. I was able to go to China and meet with these North Korean farmers and do a farmer-to-farmer exchange program. Really cool things I saw in China, and I got to meet with the farmers from North Korea. Briefly, AFSC was able to give 6 cold frames to the North Koreans and get it in there along with seed and fertilizer, and then they're growing these cold frames like you see on the left. The picture on the right is the delegation, and you can see the devastation that goes on in the hillsides themselves. The North Korean delegation, picture of China, Bolivia, because of the lithium mines and the international corporations that want to overthrow the government so they can strip the government and the natural resources through lithium mining. Social justice. They have these effigies hanging up in the Altiplano and villages. The military and the police are not the friends of the villagers. They have their own community justice. And this is the sign that says if you violate their justice, their community rules, you will pay the price. And they are not fooling around, to be honest with you. Oh, the other picture I wanted to show you a little bit is I was able to travel to the coca fields because we heard about all the violence in the coca fields and how people are destroying the jungles. That's not true. That's all American media. These people are peasants, just like myself, working hard to grow something so they can feed their families. And it wasn't no violence, it wasn't no drug abuse, it wasn't none of that crap that you hear about. Here's a picture of me down there. I thought just little, hey, I was down there. Here's the ladies down from Espanola and Embudo, Anthony and Chaparral. So the interesting thing now is working on the Texas border. We're bleeding into Texas quite a bit and into Arizona and Mexico. You should see the people coming up. One of the main things in Anthony and Chaparral is we're calling it the migration corridor for farmers because people are coming across, families are being stranded. So farming, they go out there, they're participating in our sites in Chaparral and Anthony. They're growing food in their backyards in the middle of the desert. And they're able to start to feed their families. They're so proud. They take me sometimes these little bitty backyards in the desert. And they have a few tomato plants, a few cucumber plants. And then they get a little embarrassed because they realize that I see that they're using the drip tape AFSC provided to the training site. But we don't say anything because that's all they have. How can you negate something to them when they have nothing? So I tell them, if you need some drip tape or your seeds, let me know. And then we'll somehow make sure that they get those resources that they need to grow that food to feed their family. Impact of ASC programs. The 30,000 pounds is amazing. The first year ACN grew food, we grew over 15,000 pounds. Impact of the New Mexico program. You know, the alternative to military is huge in New Mexico. And that's it for the slideshow. Yeah. We have time for questions, and I have some slides I can put on the loop, or if I have a small film too, if you guys want to see it.
Is it the one with the little kid in it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where lettuce comes from. You guys want to see that, or do you want to see some photographs or questions?
You can watch it later.
Yeah. Sure.
I have 2 questions. One, why is the dropout, like why is the graduation rate so low in New Mexico? And the second is, how do you avoid contamination? Like I know there's a big lettuce contamination thing in summer, so how do you avoid that?
So that's part of our training practices is we use good, safe handling methods. So part of our training is we teach post-harvest handling methods. So we teach them how to cut salad greens so it doesn't touch the ground. Then from there it goes into the South Valley Economic Development Center in stainless steel tables. They use water with a little bit of bleach, food-grade bleach. They'll wash the lettuce 3 rinses, dry it in an industrial salad spinner, pack it in 3-pound bags, and then send it to the school. So it's not like things are going on in their backyard, but we actually have, and we've worked a deal with the Economic Development Center, so they match. Part of the in-kind for the matching the grants is the Economic Development Center gives us a nonprofit rate to use their incubator kitchens. And then we're very clear about what it takes for food contamination. So part of the farm planning, we tell them if you're going to use manure, which we don't encourage, but it has to be at least 90 days if you're going to grow a crop above soil. It has to be at least 120 days if that crop is going to touch the soil. And then we practice it every day for a full year, and we talk about it so that when it actually goes to the schools, there is no chance of one kid getting sick. And then we have a multi-million-dollar liability insurance in case. But I talk to the attorneys and they go, Don, if some kids get sick and dies, a multi-billion-dollar insurance isn't going to do you a bit of good. So the best thing is preventive. Make sure the fields are clean, the tools are clean, our wash stations are clean, people are washing their hands, we're using the right temperature in the coolers to cool the food, it's transported correctly. So we make sure that none of those kind of contaminations are going to occur. Yeah.
And the other question was why the dropout rate, or the...
Oh, the dropout rate in high school.
Yeah.
You can go back. We have a very, very poor state. The education programs aren't very, very good at all. But I think it's intentional. It's part of what happened when the United States took over New Mexico. There was this huge conquest. I remember I read the stories that when America took over New Mexico, they were just right off of the war, the Civil War. So they were really good at killing. They herded 600 people, men, women, and children, in a little valley in Santa Cruz, and they called it a war. They opened up with Gatling guns, and they just mowed them down, bah, 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 killing people left and right. And they were so proud that only one of their soldiers was wounded. So there's this institutional history of, let's make sure that we eliminate these people because they're a thorn in our side, and they don't comply with the American regulations. But that's historical. So it could be all sorts of things. It's a poor state, but I go back, well, it's the way life is. Yes?
What's the completion rate with the training program?
It's about 80%. It's about 80%. So some people do drop out, and sometimes it's just that they figured out it's not for them. A lot of times some personal things, and like just recently, we had this one kid that had been in the training program, and he fell off the wagon. And had to let him go, because I have a no tolerance for drugs or alcohol in the training fields. And I really hated to do it. But I told him, you clean up, man, just come back and we'll give you another chance. Just life. Yeah.
I have a question about, so the demand for people, for the New Mexico program to train other people in other states and indigenous people in other places is really high. And I wonder, it seems as though, like I think about the Miami program and Hector Martinez, and who works with farm workers and who does wage theft work. And I think about some program like this, a farmer program, building a co-op there would be so powerful. And I wonder about the spread of your program, not necessarily beyond, in other organizations, but within AFSC.
I'd love to see that. And I didn't know about the Florida one, but I know I've been talking to the folks in Denver, and they'd love for me to go up there and try to show them what we're doing so that they could start to replicate it in Denver. I know in Sacramento, Luis Mascareñas there, he wants us to go up there and help him also. So I know there's a lot of demand with the AFSC itself. So if there would be any possibility that we could do that, I think it would be very beneficial to farm workers, farmers, or people that would like to be growers. And that's why we created the training manuals, because there's no way that any one person can do all of this. So we're trying to develop tools that other people could replicate, use it to replicate in their sites. And we've gone as far as thinking, really brainstorming is, what would it look like for a central training center where people could go in, get trained, maybe not for a full year, but short periods of times, and then go back to their community and start to replicate it. That'd be so great if we could do something like that.
There's a Quaker, Jerry Rudolph, who I think is a donor but who really wants to promote immigrant co-ops. And I told him about your program. He's like, let's figure out a way to get it. He's in South Carolina, So, I mean, like South Carolina, I mean, there's all of those places
Oh,
that
yeah.
it seems like. And it seems like what's amazing about your program is that it has bipartisan support in the legislature and the sense that, in my sense of why, I mean, you probably have lots of reasons why, but I mean, it's also about relationships, but it seems as though it's because it's all about self-determination and people like supporting that and about the kids.
Yeah, we when we talk, I didn't do it enough, but we always highlight vulnerable children because the work that we're doing really is impacting vulnerable children. So once you talk about vulnerable children and health issues, it breaks down a lot of those barriers, and that's where people start to say, I might be able to put in a little bit of resource or I'll open the door and listen to why you don't think it's such a good program. Yeah. But I'd love to start something where more people could go in and actually take it back and start to replicate it. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, let's thank Don again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.